online, harsher penalties for people caught using their phone at the wheel.
And the breathtaking locations in our region drawing a crowd thanks to ITV's drama Broadchurch. Good evening. A blind man says he was refused the chance of a job because his prospective employer didn't want a guide dog in the office. Ian Brooks, who's from Glastonbury, has been applying for jobs in computer programming for years.
But even though he appeared to fit the job spec perfectly for his last application, he got a call saying his dog wasn't welcome. Mr Brooks and disability campaigners say this is discrimination. Robert Murphy reports.
The guide dog, Velvet, provides the vision Ian Brooks would love to have. He has what they call 10% vision. He's registered blind. But it's not his lack of sight that was the problem for his last potential employer. It was his canine companion.
It made me feel worthless. It really did. I mean, I felt like I'd been punished for being disabled.
Ian Brooks has been looking for a permanent job in programming or web design for years. He says he's always been clear and open about needing Velvet at his side. His agency called to say a company was interested in interviewing him, but then they found out about the dog and they rejected him.
I've tried hard. So when I was offered that interview the other day, it felt to me like I'd won the lottery. I thought, finally, a chance. I'd no guarantee of actually getting the job, but an interview to me was, it was all I wanted. I felt, not only do I feel robbed about the not having the job, I feel robbed about not having an interview.
Mr Brooks works part-time at a Somerset care provider, and there he says they welcome his guide dog.
They often joke about the fact that they would employ Velvet and just get me to go and look after her, you know, and you couldn't really ask for anything more from them. You know, so many companies do embrace people with disabilities.
Mr Brooks's agency did not respond to our request for a comment. So what does the law say?
It's very clear that under the Equality Act 2010, an employer shouldn't discriminate against a disabled person because of a mobility aid that they need. And a guide dog is regarded as a mobility aid. A guide dog's in a very different capacity to a pet dog.
So Ian Brooks is out hunting for a job, looking for work with a working dog. Robert Murphy, ITV News, Glastonbury.
Well, I'm joined by Dan Pescod from the Royal National Institute of Blind People. Welcome to you. We were introduced to Velvet in Rob's report. Velvet didn't look as though she would cause much disruption. Is that a fair reason?
It's not at all a fair and acceptable reason to refuse somebody a job interview on the basis that they have a guide dog, and indeed the law prohibits such action. Employers are required by law to not discriminate against blind and partially sighted people, both in terms of the recruitment process and then obviously for blind and partially sighted employees.
Well, Mr Brooks's case has caused lots of response online with our viewers. Christopher Burns says attitudes simply need to change, full stop. But is it just a case of changing attitudes, or does there need to be a more proactive approach from the government?
Well, it's definitely a question of both. So we're working, encouraging and urging the government to take firmer action and to take steps to ensure that the law is enforced. And we'll certainly be talking to Mr Brooks and giving him legal advice. But more broadly, as I say, employers' attitudes at the moment, with 9 out of 10 feeling that it would be difficult to employ a blind or partially sighted person, clearly there's a big job still to be done in terms of employer attitudes improving, because they're wrong about that. Those that think that it's entirely possible to employ blind and partially sighted people to do a whole range of different jobs.
OK, and just finally, one more of those comments. Angie Thomas says she's been turned away in the past because she needed adjustments to cope with her arm disability. Should employers be expected to make any adjustments people might need, or are there times when it's reasonable to say, look, we just can't?
Well, there is such a concept as a reasonable adjustment. The word reasonable exists in the law, so where adjustments are reasonable, they're not seen as overly burdensome on an employer, and often that is the case in order to employ a person with a disability, then the employer is required to take that action. But I should point out also that there is an excellent government paid scheme called Access to Work, by which employers can procure, for instance, the equipment that's needed so that a blind person can use a computer or could get access to a taxi service to take them to work. So these schemes are out there, and again, people and employers need to know about these schemes and need to take advantage of them.
OK, Mr Pescod, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
Next tonight, a verdict of unlawful killing has been recorded at the inquest into the deaths of 30 British people, including a couple from Wiltshire who were killed in a terrorist attack on a beach in Tunisia.
Great-grandfather John Welch and his partner Eileen Swannock died in June 2015. They were in the resort of Seuss when a gunman opened fire on the beach of their hotel. Kevin Ashford reports.
It took the coroner, Judge Nicholas Thorane Smith, some 20 minutes to read out his conclusions in all the cases of the 30 British victims of the terror attack. In each case, he ruled they were unlawfully killed by the terrorist Seftin Rezgui. That included a couple from Wiltshire who was shot on the beach at the Imperial Mahaba Hotel in June 2015. 74-year-old John Welsh from Corsham suffered neck and chest wounds. His partner of 8 years, 73-year-old Eileen Swannock, died after being shot in the chest. In his summing up, the coroner described the hotel's response to the attack as disorganised and chaotic, although he said some members of staff showed conspicuous personal courage, as did a number of the hotel guests. However, he was scathing about what he called the delayed response by the Tunisian police force, a delay he described as deliberate and unjustifiable. At the start of today's proceedings, the coroner made it clear that his rulings would include no suggestion of neglect either by the hotel owners or the travel firm, because he said he had no legal power to do so, and as a result a number of the families involved say they're going to take legal action in the civil courts. The coroner will also now draw up what's known as a Prevent Future Deaths report, outlining what lessons, if any, can be learned. Kevin Ashford, ITV News at the Royal Courts of Justice.
There's still time to have your say on major changes to healthcare in Dorset. Inpatient wards could be closed at half the county's community hospitals and the 3 big hospitals restructured. The aim is to save £185 million and cope with an increasing and ageing population. Campaigners fighting to protect Shaftesbury's hospital are encouraging people to take part in the public consultation, which ends tonight.
What could be the world's highest straw pavilion was lifted into position in the heart of Bristol today. It's the centrepiece of a new rooftop garden, 8 floors above the city. 2 tower office blocks built in the 1970s are being converted into apartments. The Sky Garden and its pavilion will only be accessible by the residents of the 148 new homes.
Poultry farmers across the southwest were given the go-ahead today to let their free-range chickens roam outside once again, as some of the restrictions surrounding the outbreak of avian flu were relaxed.
But for some, the risk of their birds contracting the virus is too great to let them outside, even if it means giving up their free-range status. Bob Cruz reports.
They're called free-range chickens, but these hens haven't seen the outside world since last year. They've been shut indoors for their own welfare, to protect against the threat of deadly avian influenza, bird flu. From today, the government order to keep them inside has been lifted and they are now allowed out. But the farmer here is keeping the doors closed for now. He'll lose his free-range designation, but he'd rather that than risk an outbreak and lose his entire flock.
Retailers are happy to come on paying the free-range egg premium, so the long short of it is there's no real pressure on us to let the hens out. Better be safe than sorry, I think. I really don't see why anyone would take the risk, assuming they're getting paid what they were before.
Hens can be kept indoors for 12 weeks and still keep their free-range status. So yesterday, the 11,500 eggs rolling off this conveyor belt were sold as free-range. From today, though, as the hens are still inside, they'll now be boxed and badged as barn eggs. The government lifted the housing order today to allow as many producers as possible to keep their free-range designation. There are still some restrictions, though. A number of higher risk zones have been identified. Areas near wetlands, lakes and estuaries where large numbers of wild water birds gather. In these areas, hens can be allowed outside, but they must be in netted enclosures to keep them apart from infected wild birds.
If you're a free-range poultry keeper, I think it's a question of wherever you are, even if you're in a low-risk area, assessing the risk, assessing what the risk to your business is of an outbreak, and making sure, if you choose to let the birds out, even under netting, that you've made a thorough investigation of what the risks are, that you make sure you adhere strictly to all the biosecurity precautions to keep your birds separate from wild birds, and make sure you do everything you can to stay vigilant, because the risk of the disease, at the moment at least, is still high.
Everyone who keeps poultry, even if it's just a few chickens in the backyard, has to stick to these rules, and they're likely to be in place until at least the end of April. Bob Cruz, ITV News.
Well, we can speak to Bob Cruz now. Bob, there are still some restrictions in place, as you pointed out in your report, but what effect is this going to have on us as consumers?
Well, Jonty, it's Pancake Day today, of course, so plenty of people will have been out and bought some eggs today. The question is over whether there might be a shortage of free-range eggs in future. For those big commercial producers inside the higher risk zones I mentioned, to put a net over the entire outside space that they use would be potentially completely impractical. There may also be other farmers, like the one I visited today, outside the higher risk zones, who also want to keep their doors shut just to protect their hens. But we're told that at the moment there is no expectation of a shortage of free-range eggs either now or in the foreseeable future. The other question is over whether they can get their free-range status back once they've lost it. DEFRA told us today that once the hens are turned outside again, they can start using that free-range designation again, and they'll be able to put free-range on the egg box once again.
OK, Bob Cruz, thank you.
Still ahead before 6:30. The breathtaking locations in our region drawing a crowd thanks to ITV drama Broadchurch.
And I'm on that street in Clevedon. That was on Broadchurch last night. Join me live from here with the forecast.
Before that, though, in recent years, the region's police forces have been cracking down on people using a mobile phone while driving.
In November, we spent the day on patrol with Gloucestershire police as they repeatedly caught people red-handed. From tomorrow, anyone caught on their phone behind the wheel will face harsher penalties. Matt Price explains.
17-year-old Finley only passed his test a few weeks ago. A new driver with new laws to learn. From midnight, those caught using a mobile phone at the wheel face tougher punishments. It's something Finley's instructor has warned him about.
You use your mobile phone, you'll lose your car because it's against the law to use a mobile phone in the car. He'd turn his off as soon as the lesson started.
Inexperienced drivers are being warned that one mistake could cost them their newfound independence. 6 points and a £200 fine is enough for new drivers to have their licence revoked. Road safety campaigners say it's the risk of killing someone, though, that should be the main deterrent.
If you're young and you're texting behind the wheel, you're 4 times more likely to be involved in a fatal or serious crash. Too many people are losing their lives, are being seriously injured, and they're young and they're vulnerable drivers.
But are drivers in support of a change to the law?
I think that's right, because when you're on your mobile phone you get really distracted.
I think it's a good idea. I think, yeah, it needs to be stricter. People still doing it and it's very dangerous.
6 points on my licence, 200 should be more.
No. Finley uses his car's inbuilt phone so that he can legally take calls while on the move.
Hi, sweetheart. Are you on your way to college?
Yeah.
For him, it's irresponsible if other motorists don't do the same.
Angry, annoyed, because everyone can get a hands-free kit for their car, but people don't choose to use them.
One report from motoring group the RAC claims just under a third of drivers admit to using their mobile phones behind the wheel. Road safety campaigners will no doubt hope this law change deters drivers from doing that, while also saving lives. Matt Price, ITV News.
Now the ITV News continues this Tuesday evening with the national and international stories at 6:30. Mary Nightingale has the details.
Tunisian police are blamed for a cowardly delay in responding to the terror attacks on a beach in Tunisia. 30 British holidaymakers died in Sousse. A coroner today ruled their deaths were unlawful. Sir Philip Green stumps up £363 million to pay the pensions of former BHS workers. And why children in England will be taught about sex and relationships from the age of 4. Well, do join me for those stories and more at 6:30.
The main headlines in the West Country this evening. A blind man from Glastonbury says he was refused the chance of a job because his prospective employer didn't want a guide dog in the office. Ian Brooks has been applying for jobs in computer programming for years, but after his last application he got a call saying his dog wasn't welcome. Mr Brooks and disability campaigners say he is being discriminated against. And as we've just heard, the coroner at the inquest of the victims of a Tunisia terror attack, including 2 pensioners from Wiltshire, has ruled that they were unlawfully killed. Great-grandfather John Welch and his partner Eileen Swannock from Corsham died in a gunman attack in Sousse in June 2015.
And don't forget that you can get in touch with us about any of the stories that we have covered on this evening's programme. The details are on your screen. We'd also like to hear from you if you've got a story that you would like us to look into. The best way to get in contact is our email address, westcountry@itv.com.
Biologists at the University of the West of England have found a new use for Lego. They're using it to teach school children about genetics. Today they joined Year 9 pupils at the Bridge Learning Campus in Bristol to build Lego cars according to a genetic code and to explore what happens when genetics go wrong. Teachers hope it'll give pupils a taste for science.
A lot of students are finding it quite difficult to kind of get engaged with science. They see the concepts as quite lofty, they don't really understand why they're learning them. So things like this box project with UWE and Health Education England are really important for getting students to kind of think about how science is related to them.
Brilliant idea. My boys would love it. Would yours?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to a bit of sport because all the region's league sides are in action tonight. Bristol City travel to Aston Villa, hoping to build on Saturday's draw with Newcastle. In League One, Swindon welcome Gillingham to the county ground, while Bristol Rovers are away at Bolton. And in League Two, Cheltenham have a tough match against third-placed Carlisle, while Yeovil host Mansfield.
Now, last night, more than 7.5 million people tuned in to watch the return of Broadchurch here on ITV for its 3rd and final series.
It is, of course, filmed here in the West Country, and tourism bosses have told us that when Broadchurch is shown on our screens, fans arrive in their drones.
And they're hoping this series will be no different. Kylie went to see some of the locations that feature in the show.
Now, when it all began back in 2013, it's the stunning location that became the centrepiece for one of TV's most successful dramas. And wherever Broadchurch is filmed, it attracts visitors from across the country and around the world. There are now Broadchurch tours here in West Bay, where people might hope to catch a glimpse of the stars, or even sit in the very spot they did. Just what has Broadchurch done for this area?
Well, it's a fantastic programme that naturally brings people here. They watch the TV programme, they want to come and see where it's filmed. We've done some research with local businesses, and most have found an uplift from having Broadchurch here. So the whole thing is very positive for the area.
When they see the actual series, I think people question as to where is it, and we'd like to go and see it, and so they come here. Obviously, we want people to come, and we try and boost it as much as we possibly can, and this series is just great for us.
And not just West Bay, North Somerset too is once again a key location for this series. And even some of the people living here in Clevedon gave up their homes for filming. We were there when this house was transformed into a film set. What was it like having all those people in your house?
It was fun, and
Also because there are famous people there, and the stars are Olivia Colman and David Tennant, who everybody knows, and Sarah Parish and Mark Baisley are the two actors who live in our house, so obviously we saw them as well. You almost feel a bit, you know who they are, and they have no idea who you are, and I sort of say, well, I'm Paul, I own the house here. But, so it's a slightly unusual sort of conversation, but it's quite fun having them in your house.
Now, were you kind of sworn to secrecy about what was going on, or could you tell your friends?
Oh, no, very much sworn to secrecy, yes. Plot-wise, I mean, you couldn't help but tell your friends, because there were lorries parked all up the road and great lights, and they put up a tea table outside the drive, so there was no way you could disguise the fact something odd was going on.
What did they think about your house being used in it?
Oh, it was thrilling, yes. They all wanted to know, yeah. They come and dress it the day before, and so I did ring up my chums that night and say, hey, do you want to come round and see my house? Redone.
And even the local church too needed a few tweaks to be ready for filming.
Huge amount of kit, and dozens of technicians, sound and lighting and all the rest of it. And little railway tracks for the cameras, it's what goes into creating a fictional world is absolutely astounding, the effort and the work and the commitment behind it. It was the church's great privilege and honour and joy to host them as they created this fictional town called Broadchurch.
DS Miller at DI Hardy, Wessex Police. Could we have a chat, please?
As the third series airs, even if it really is the last one, it's these iconic locations that will draw Broadchurch fans for years to come.
That's amazing. Can you imagine having Olivia Colman and David Tennant in your kitchen?
I know, it'd be a bit surreal, wouldn't it? And some amazing locations as well. So a great report there from Kylie. You can see much more about Broadchurch, including when we went behind the scenes with the stars, Olivia Colman and David Tennant. There's all available on our website. But now let's move on to the forecast, because there were some amazing spots in Kylie's piece there. Alex is at one of the locations you would have seen in last night's show. He's in Clevedon. Alex, you're on that street.
I am on that street, and guess what you can see behind me? It's that bin that was in quite prominent shot. I'm talking a load of rubbish. Actually, I'm not. It really was in shot. Hello there. You okay? Yeah, but this is the street, Hill Street, which featured in Broadchurch. When the cast and crew were here, it was actually a lot better weather-wise. Today it has been fairly windy. It's probably kept the tourists away, but I'm sure as we head into the summer months, they'll be flocking here to see that bin and this street, which actually has some lovely shops on it. But as I say, today it hasn't looked so pleasant. We've had outbreaks of rain, cloudy skies above as well, and there is more to come as we head through the next few days, because low pressure stays very much in control. So what I would say is keep your brolly handy, because you will need it as we head through to the weekend. Right, here are the details for the next few days.
Sunbathing, pressure dropping. Great Western Railway sponsors the ITV Westcountry weather.
Well, first, let's take a look at the pressure pattern sequence over the next couple of days, which does highlight the areas of low pressure, which are going to keep things on the unsettled side. So fairly strong winds and also further outbreaks of rain. So make sure you do keep the brolly fairly handy. As we head through this evening, though, it is going to be turning a fair bit drier, still one or two showers around, also some clear breaks, and temperatures are going to be chilly but not as cold as last night. The breeze helping to keep them on the plus side, so you won't need your windscreen scraper first thing tomorrow morning. However, it is going to be a very grey start tomorrow morning. We're going to see another weather system moving in from the southwest, and that's going to produce a lot of cloud and a period of fairly steady, heavy rain as we head through tomorrow daytime. So as I say, do keep the brolly handy. Temperature-wise, we're looking at highs of maybe 9 to 10 degrees Celsius, so a bit better than in recent days. But during the afternoon, we're going to see the winds picking up, and it is going to be fairly strong, so that will make it feel quite chilly, a bit like it has done today. Now, as we head through the rest of the week, well, Thursday, we actually get a brief respite. Although it will be fairly cloudy, we could see one or two bright and sunny breaks developing. and temperatures are going to be a touch better as well. But heading into Friday, things will start to turn back unsettled, more cloud cover and another banded rain coming through, which is going to be fairly heavy. Again, the wind's picking up and it's a fairly wet start to the weekend as well. That's your forecast. Have a great evening. I'll see you later.
Great Western Railway sponsors the ITV Westcountry weather.
I think he was a bit excited there, Alex.
I know.
He was a bit starstruck, that poor lady.
Excited to see what happens next week as well.
Yeah.
That is it from the two of us this Tuesday evening. I'll be back with the late news for you tonight. That's at 11 o'clock after the nightly show.
Yes, but for now, we'll hand you to Mary Nightingale as the ITV News continues. Whatever you're doing, do you have a lovely evening. Goodbye from John T and myself.
Bye-bye.